Now, how did you come to the sort of flaccid
Yeah.
element of your guns, since your original idea was just comparing two different cultures when it came to it?
Yeah. So as this was one of those projects where I'm sure you know, and people who make art and who create things know how you like kind of get obsessed with making something and you make a ton of them. So I started making a lot of guns, and as I was making these, I was thinking about kind of these issues of like, actually, as I was making them, there was more and more mass shootings happening, and they were all mostly all at the hands of men. And I was thinking, what is up with these dudes and guns, really? And and so I was kind of thinking about this relationship with masculinity and gun culture and how the two merged. But really not a lot of people were writing about it or exploring that topic. And it's also something that's kind of hard to um, explore that with facts. You know what I mean? But at the time, someone was going to write about my work, I think for Vice, and I was like, I think you should write about this angle of masculinity and gun culture. And as I was kind of like emailing back and forth with her, this article came out in Quartz that was America's gun problem has everything to do with America's masculinity problem. And so that was this like kind of pivotal moment for me where I was like, ooh, I'm gonna make these more exaggerated and more droopy and like elongated and kind of like sad and but also comical at the same time.
Yeah.
So they're kind of touching on these issues of gender and in gun ownership and in this like masculine, prideful Americana object of a gun.
And what is the reaction by men when they see these?
um, it's funny. One of my friends has one of these guns like on her bed, and she says that when men come to her apartment, they like immediately pick it up and like want to hold it, which is kind of funny. And I have some cousins who are
Do you,
very proud.
do you think that's to feel a sense of power, or it's very
I don't know.
bad that the gun
Yeah,
is
she was just like, men cannot resist to like they want to hold it, which is funny.
okay?
But and then I have some like cousins who are big gun owners who are they're like, I know you're kind of like toying with like I know you're not a big gun fan, but I still kind of like these. Or like, oh, I want to get one of those for my cousin or my husband, he loves to shoot. So there's this like interesting, I think they kind of walk this line of being comical and kind of like critical of gun culture, but also kind of because they have this humor element that they're able to kind of like, oh, I kind of like this object, or like this is a playful, fun, like cuddly object, which I think is explains or like explores the complicated relationship that we have with these weapons, like why we have so many mass shootings and we don't ban guns,
Mm-hmm.
why we can't even, why it's hard to pass legislation on it, or there's, it's not as simple as like guns are bad, we should not have them, but and there's also, there's a lot of money and lobbying and a lot of other messed up things involved in the equation. But when it comes down to is like gun ownership is part of a lot of people's identity. And I think that when you question people's identity, it gets murky.
Yeah. I actually find as a textile artist that working in a soft medium that's associated with women and carries a lot of stereotypes with it, when you address radical subjects within those mediums, people are not as inflamed when they see them as they normally might on a regular day. And I think that has a lot to do with these feminine stereotypes that women are weak and they're not strong, and they're soft and they're non-threatening. And while I really hate and disagree with those stereotypes. As an artist, they sort of work to my advantage when trying to bridge the gap between two different political spectrums. And I think you're describing a similar experience as an artist in the work that you make.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a show in my hometown in Lexington, Kentucky at Institute 193, this gallery. They actually have another location in New York. But anyway, I was in the gallery and there were these two women that came in. They didn't know that I was the artist. And so I watched them first be like, oh, they're so cute. These are so like, oh, I love the colors. I love this, whatever. And then they were like, kind of paused for a second and they were like, well, like I live on a farm and like I have a gun and I like that it makes me feel protected. This other one was like, yeah, well, we don't need these assault rifles. Like, I think that those should be banned. And it was like they were able to engage in this conversation through the lens of these like cuddly, droopy, stuffed animal like sculptures that maybe they would have had on their own, maybe not. I don't know. So it's definitely this like, yeah, it's a good vessel for like entry into something that maybe would be more divisive in another medium.
Yeah, I definitely think textiles sort of and fiber art lends itself to a more comfortable discussion about hard issues. So, have you ever experienced any negative reactions from your work?
Yes, with this series specifically, there was an article in Glenn Beck's website, The Blaze, that was, I think the title of it was something along the lines of feminist artist takes on toxic masculinity with gun sculptures. And it was a very negative article about me, about my work, about, yeah, just really a negative article about the work itself. And from that article, there was a comment section, of course, which everyone says that you should not read. But I read that comment section. There was like 95, I think, comments that were predominantly really negative about me, my work, my sexuality, my gender, my sanity. So a lot of those were like, it was interesting because it was like the same weird aggression that I was kind of exploring with this like kind of pent up masculinity in gun ownership, but it was like blatantly out there in text form in the comment section of this article. So I took those comments and I turned them into these banners that were kind of echo these suffragette banners of like women fighting for the right to vote, for equality, but taking these like internet comments. So a lot of them were like clear, like the one that was kind of like the finale one for me was clearly Natalie Baxter is confused about her role as a woman because she's quilting gun sculptures. Or they were like this
Women don't do that. They don't
yeah,
status quo, and they don't mind themselves with things that are associated with men or meant for men.
yeah.
Okay.
Or like just a man hating feminazi with no redeemable qualities, not to mention no brain. Or like this libtard is out of her freaking mind. Like all of these like very a lot of new words that I learned, but a lot of like negative comments about me that I thought was really interesting because it was like these people getting very upset for me making these gun sculptures out of fabric that are like pretty innocent looking. But that kind of like drilled in my head that how linked gun culture is to your identity, and how if you threaten that identity that you feel less of a person or less of a man or less of a less, I guess. So that was an interesting kind of addition to the Warm Gun series.
Wow. I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Okay.
Not deserved. Um,
It's like most women would have to deal with something like that on the internet if they put themselves out there. So I don't feel very special.
yeah, unfortunately, in this day and age, it's just something that happens a lot. Having known you for a little while now, We know now that's true. They're all just trolls. But it's also kind of confirming your original idea and impetus for the idea and addressing it.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, you have to go through those growing pains as an artist, definitely as a feminist, and definitely as a woman. These are the things that happen to us that sort of drive us to make this work, to respond to it, to challenge the status quo. And um,
Mhm.
I mean, I appreciate the work that you make. So,
Yeah. Thank you.
well, as a curator in this show, I just see it so much about this idea of failure in these objects to achieve their goal of protection for most people. Uh, you know, this fallacy of masculinity in them through the patterns and the colors that you choose, and even through the medium of sewing. So many artists have done like gun artwork, but I think what's really successful about your artwork is how quickly it gets to that idea of uh, failure in protection, failure to uphold the health of a community, but
Mhm.
have who have experienced gun violence, um,
Mhm.
and it does it in a it's a little flippant, a little sassy, a little comical, like you said, um, but yeah, in a way that's almost inert. And I think that inertness is gets at the fact that when you have people who own guns, like you mentioned, they're not immediately offended that they might read this as failure. You know, you
Mhm.
edge off a little bit. And so when I'm putting together this gun show and thinking about consumerism, a lot of the other artists have addressed the issue of gun consumerism and gun violence in their own personal way, and that you take the literal physical object and really get at the heart of the consumerism elements of it, like the direct business to person element to it. It's no coincidence that the show's really textile heavy. You and I are not the only ones. I think there's at least four of us uh,
Yeah.
in textiles. Which, speaking of the other artists in the show, I love the conversation between you and Erica Diamond's work. So you have the
Mhm.
Kevlar vest meant to protect people within disenfranchised communities that lack the same civil protections than someone who's like cis, hetero, etc. And then this conversation with the actual guns
Mhm.
right there. I think there's a real conversation between the two, the effectiveness of one to protect the other, but also cause harm. Yeah, that's Selimo, the other co-curator's credit to her, but I'm very excited by it.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for including me in the show.
No problem. Where can people learn more about you?
Well, I have a website, nataliebaxter.com, and I post a lot of stuff on Instagram too. My Instagram is nattybax, Nattybax.
Okay, great. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining me and sharing a little bit more about yourself and your work. And thank you so much for being part of the show too.
Yeah, thank you.